Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at the latest expansion for Time Stories from Space Cowboys. That expansion is called Under the Mask. I do believe this is the fourth adventure, if you're counting the original adventure that comes with the base game. And I just realized that all through today, in Facebook posts and comments, I was saying this was called Favor of the Pharaoh, which is a completely different game. But hey, you can forgive me for that. They're both Egypt related? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to do the same thing we did with my last expansion review, which was for Prophecy of Dragons. We are going to have this split into two parts. So the royal we. The first part is no spoilers whatsoever. If you have not played this module, if you're just watching this because you never even played Time Stories and you're just curious about what people are talking about, then the first half of this, which will be clearly delineated, should be fine for you. I'm not going to spoil any specific things. I'll talk about the game in very general terms. It's already a known quantity that this takes place in ancient Egypt, so that's not a spoiler. And I'll just touch on what I liked and what I didn't like about it. Okay? Now, for those of you who have played it already, or you just don't care, you don't think you're ever going to play this, and you don't care if it's spoiled for you for whatever reason, the second half of this review will be with spoilers, where I go into some greater detail about my thoughts on very specific things. Okay? Just warning you ahead of time. So, I personally believe this is the worst of the Time Stories expansions. I'll just jump right into it and say that right up front. Now, having said that, this is Time Stories. It is one of my favorite games of last year and one of my favorite games of all time at this point. It's amazing. So I would argue that the worst Time Stories expansion is better than most of the games I've played this year. That is without a doubt true. Having said that, when you stack this up even to the first two adventures, which was Asylum and the Marcy case, it doesn't hold up. And especially if you hold it up to a Prophecy of Dragons, which I know some people didn't like. Other reviewers didn't like it. I loved it. I thought it really, for the first time, showed what Time Stories could do full throttle, right? And so perhaps the timing was off on this for me. Meaning that if this expansion had come out before Prophecy of Dragons, I'd still be disappointed, but maybe it wouldn't feel so pronounced, right? But having followed up Prophecy of Dragons with this, I'm like, meh. I will say, before anything else that I have to criticize about it, that my bias is showing here. In the sense that I am not into ancient Egypt as a theme. Egypt is fine. I've played a few games that use it okay. In role-playing games, especially, there was a continent or a country, maybe, in Faerun, in the Forgotten Realm setting that was ancient Egyptian based, themed in a way, and it was awesome. I loved it. But that's the thing. When you do ancient Egypt and it's like way over the top and magical with all like the mythical stuff, come to life, so to speak, then it's really cool for me. When it's just ancient historical Egypt, even with some embellishments, and even in the Time Stories universe where you're quantum leaping around to receptacles, it doesn't work for me as well. So that's my bias up front and part of why I didn't like this. But I think I can say safely that there are some other things I definitely didn't like, mechanically speaking, and just that sort of clash with other adventures in the Time Stories universe. Primarily is the fact that nothing exciting happens in this mod. Not really. There's a couple of things that are like, oh, okay, that's kind of fun and ancient Egyptian-y. But other than that, it felt like a boring chore most of the time. A lot of like, get this to go here, to get this to go here, moving items around, moving things around in a way. I'm trying to be non-specific here because this is the non-spoiler part. And nothing like dramatic and over the top and very flavorful and fun. It just felt like, oh, we're just doing chores in a sense. And there's like a kind of a conspiracy type thing that unfolds, but nowhere near as interesting as what happened in A Prophecy of Dragons, or even in the Marcy case, really. So I'm pretty disappointed that this just didn't bring its A game. Here's the thing. There was a lot of like fetch quests in a sense. That's kind of how I felt about this mod. And it almost felt like this was the Eurogamer's Time Stories. So maybe some of you will like that. to me, it just felt bland, and it felt like it was a significant downgrade. Like, it felt like this could have been the second module, and therefore just gave us a taste of what Time Stories was capable of. Instead, it felt like a complete, like, you got this graph going up of excitement for Time Stories, and it goes, brrr. That's kind of how I felt. It's tough to say too much else without going into really specifics. This is, again, my reviews for Time Stories are the only ones where I have to have notes for any of my reviews, because I'm trying to keep track of, like, what's going on. I will say that there was not a sense of urgency in this one. In fact, I introduced a new player to this game who said, I feel like there's no urgency here. And we tried to tell him, yeah, but the other ones did have a sense of urgency. Even if you had to go through multiple runs, and you knew that you would be able to go through multiple runs, it still felt like we don't want to do that as much as possible. We want to get through it as quickly as possible. But this one just felt like, yeah, let's just kind of meander about. Yeah, let's get this. Let's get the currency here and take it to here to get the thing. That's just how I felt the most, and everyone kind of felt. It was very dull. In fact, this was the very first time where we didn't do another run right afterwards. We stopped, and I actually had to do it again with another group. That sucks. That really sucks. So, like, and even with the information I had ahead of time, I didn't feel like it was that, like, exciting. Like, oh, now I know something you don't. But I didn't know anything that interesting than the rest of the new group. So that's very disappointing. Also, this is something I hate to tease because I can't go into specifics without going into spoilers. There is a new mechanism introduced in this mod, which, when I first read it, I'm like, oh, well, whoa, that changes everything. That's really interesting. That can add some nice flavor to the game. It totally doesn't. It totally feels like another chore, another thing that you have to do that's just like randomly hoping it works out for you. And, of course, then on future runs, you know what to do. But, again, once it gets to that point, there's nothing exciting about it. It's just another fetch quest, in a sense. Oh, we have to go to get this thing now because we have to have that, is what this new mechanism boils down to, like everything else in this mod. I may be being too harsh on it. I know that other adventures in the Time Stories line have had things you just have to do that feel very chore-like, but interspersed between those moments are really cool, bursting, excitement, thematic moments. I felt none of that here. So again, okay, what I like about it, the new mechanism does is at least interesting at first. So I'll give them that. They're trying. I do like a couple of the individual quests that I can't go into details about because they did think outside of the box a little bit. And like I said, there's like kind of a conspiracy that you're unraveling as you go through this ancient pharaoh's kingdom, that kind of thing. But for the most part, the good was overshadowed by the bad. And again, you have to take this as a whole. So every mod, I have to compare every mod against each other, and this falls very flat. Definitely my least favorite of all of them. Now, if you want a little more detail, if you don't care about spoilers, or if you've already played it yourself and want to know what I think, come back in just a moment for the spoiler version of this. Stay tuned. Alright, well, I assume that most of you who are watching this right now, either you just don't care, but most of you probably have played it yourself, and you want to commiserate, which is how it's happened in previous videos. So if you are, I would love to know what you think about this. If you completely disagree with me, I'm even more interested to know what you think and why I'm horribly wrong in your eyes. But if you do so, please down in the comment section write like spoilers before your thing, okay? Just as a courtesy to anyone else who's just stumbling in, right? So what I really hated about this, and I used the phrase anticlimactic, I believe, in the first part of this. And the reason for that is because the whole ending section was awful. That's the first thing that pops in my mind when I'm thinking about how much I disliked this mod and why I disliked it. Because you go through the puzzle room, right? And when you get through the puzzle room, it's if you fail in it, you drown. And so that adds some urgency to the game. It's like, okay, that's legit, things that we have to worry about dying and failing altogether. And actually, I do think, this is what I mentioned in the beginning that some individual quests were interesting to me. I do like that puzzle because it's kind of fun. I don't usually like people having to do wacky physical stunts in the middle of games. It's why I hated the Cartoon Network deck builder. But in this particular case, I thought it was clever. Like, okay, you're holding your breath, and you gotta... okay, oh, we gotta count them. That kind of thing. That was neat. I'll give it that. But then you drown, and then you have the option of just stopping. I understand it's just an option, and you probably shouldn't. But you know what? I kind of hate that they give you the option. I kind of hate that you can just take the cowardly, easy way out. Because it kind of just goes to show what I felt about this entire mod. That they were just half-assing it. We want to do an ancient Egyptian adventure. Okay, not personally my thing, but I could get on board with it because it's time stories. They make the simplest, fetch it quest, pick up and deliver game. By the way, maybe that was their goal. Their goal might have been, hey, we actually want to explore different board game mechanisms in each one. So for Prophecy of Dragons was their fantasy, cast spells, roll a bunch of dice all the time, dungeon crawling, sort of, right? By the way, I won't go into too many details on that, assuming you may not have played that one. Maybe you skipped it, whatever. But this one might have been there. Let's do some Eurogame element, pick up and deliver type stuff. Why? Even if you wanted to try different elements, that's not what this is about. Time Stories is an Ameritrash game. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it. It's a random, choose-your-own-adventure, dice-shucking game. And I want theme. I want theme dripping out of it. I don't want to have to go and trade grain for gold, and then buy a hippo figurine to go and get some poison to put on a mask that we also have to find to take to a tomb to win the game. I want to go fight some scions, those weird, crazy special agents we're fighting or something. And there's a little bit of that, tiny little bit. But that's also weird. And then you get more of those cubes, or just one more of those cubes. I don't think it's possible to get both of the cubes. I went back and looked to see what the other item was, and it was another cube, but I don't think it's possible to get both cubes. But there's another one that they haven't come into play yet. So that's the only bit of the overarching Time Stories narrative that's in this game. I wanted more of that. It feels like they were amping up to that from the Prophecy of Dragons. Now, they tampened it back down. There's other little things like just a lot of the different quests, especially since they all take place in one part, we got to get the amulet here and take the amulet to the baby, or give it to the mom to give to the baby. And the whole thing with the ITB or the ITD, where you jump into other people's bodies mid-mission, again, this is what I was talking about in the first part. Great idea. But it just ends up being another item fetch quest and resource management, because you only have so many uses of it. And on the first run, or the second run, probably, it took us 3 runs to do it. Total 3 runs. The people I played with the second time didn't care that I had prior knowledge. That feels like cheating to me in a sense, but I was totally checked out from this mod after the first run, to be completely honest. So I didn't really care that much. But once you figure out, okay, this is the important person we need. We don't need the boy on the boat. We don't need the woman that badly, because we already know where the house is. So we don't need her really at all, the wet nurse on the boat. Then you can save some of your uses of the ITB. Fine. That's interesting, but again, it's just more item gathering. I was waiting for some great explosive thematic thing to happen, and it just never happened. And that's the number one failing, I think, of this mod. The anticlimactic drowning end, where you can just quit, is really stupid and weird. And the only bit of the overarching thing is with another one of the cubes. Nothing else was all that great. A couple of the puzzles were interesting. The idea was sound. I like the idea of running into the different people, and you're kind of reverse engineering this conspiracy. This guy was in jail because this guy betrayed them, and they were all working together, but they're thieves, and of course thieves fall apart and can't keep honor. There's no honor amongst thieves, that kind of thing. But it all was just too little too late for this to really be great. So I know I'm sounding really awful about this, right? But the reason I'm sounding awful is because every other mod, including the Marcy case, was previously my least favorite, was really great overall. Even when I was criticizing the Marcy case, because it was Time Stories. I still feel that here. I don't regret that I played this. It wasn't that bad, but I hope that the next one is a course correct back to the amazingness of the Asylum and the Prophecy of Dragons especially, because those, especially Prophecy, really showed off what this game could do. I want big, drastic, as Hamilton would say, broad strokes, okay? That's what I want from this game, because that's what I've come to expect at this point. But Your mileage may vary. If you disagree with me, please let me know. I really want to hear people's opinions on this one way or the other. I think it could be really fascinating. But that's it for now. I can't wait for the next one, regardless of how this one turned out, which I believe is an expedition to the Arctic, I believe, something like that. Really interested. Actually, do I have it over there? No, I don't. I can't remember the name of it, but it's like an expedition to the Arctic. Please tell me it's not Cthulhu. I hope it's not Cthulhu again. If it's not Cthulhu, I'll probably be very happy with it. But thank you so much for watching. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.